Ganjing World, a brighter way of life.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. The latest from the president on leadership in Iran as Operation Epic Fury is in its fifth day, and efforts from the State Department to get stranded Americans back to the United States. The State Department is saying more than 20,000 Americans have returned stateside since the start of the Iran war, and Israel begins limited repatriation flights. Trump ordering the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation to offer risk insurance for ships traveling to the Strait of Hormuz. But could this actually benefit China? Senators reject a Democrat push to limit President Trump's military authority in Iran. Now Republicans are pushing to fund the DHS amid a 19-day stalemate. A federal trade court with exclusive jurisdiction over importer claims has ordered the Trump administration to begin refunding billions of dollars. President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi are sued over the government's approval of a deal with TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance. The lawsuit alleges the approval was illegal.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon. We have breaking news coming out of the Trump administration. Kristi Noem will leave her role as DHS Secretary. In a post on Truth Social just now, President Trump says Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma will take over as DHS Secretary starting March 31st. He says Noem has served well with spectacular results. Noem will become special envoy for the Shield of the Americas. This is the president's new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere. Trump will announce this initiative this Saturday in Doral, Florida, alongside a dozen Latin American nations. The Pentagon identifying the last 2 of 6 soldiers killed in Operation Epic Fury. All 6 Army Reserve soldiers were killed by an Iranian drone attack on a tactical operations center in Kuwait. On Sunday, the Department of War confirming the death of Major Jeffrey O'Brien of Indianola, Iowa. The department believes the 6th soldier to be Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzin of Sacramento, California. A medical examiner will complete a positive identification. All 6 soldiers were part of the same Army Reserve Command in Des Moines, Iowa, before their deployment to Kuwait. Sri Lanka locating another Iranian vessel off its coast. That's 1 day after a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian frigate nearby in the Indian Ocean. Here's more.
The Pentagon is calling the strike historic, saying it marked the first time a U.S. submarine sunk an enemy warship with a torpedo since World War II. Sri Lankan rescuers recovered 87 bodies. Meanwhile, Iran is launching more missiles at Israeli and U.S. bases as the war enters its 6th day. Israel announcing the completion of its 12th wave of airstrikes on Tehran. Its military also striking the Iran-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. Israel is urging residents of Beirut's southern suburbs to evacuate immediately.
We are operating according to a structured plan and are focused on achieving the objectives of the operation, severely damaging the Iranian terror regime and removing existential threats to the state of Israel over time. Our air superiority and freedom of action in Iranian skies allow us to reach any location and strike any target.
And Azerbaijan says it's preparing a response after 2 Iranian drones crossed its border, injuring 4 people. The country's defense ministry warning the attacks will not go unanswered and saying it's preparing measures to protect the country's territory and civilians. The UAE says air defenses detected 7 ballistic missiles. 6 were intercepted and destroyed. Meanwhile, Qatar reporting a missile attack earlier today. Authorities urging residents to remain indoors as tensions remain high. And an explosion yesterday damaged an oil tanker off the coast of Kuwait. All crew members were confirmed safe. The U.S. military is clearing up rumors about a U.S. fighter jet crashing in Iran, saying they're baseless. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it shot down an F-15 Strike Eagle near the country's southwest borders. U.S. Central Command says the reports are not true. And a separate post shows footage of fresh strikes on Iran, saying, quote, the Iranian regime's ability to impact U.S. forces and regional partners is rapidly declining, while American combat power continues to build.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the UK is sending 4 additional Typhoon fighter jets to Qatar. Starmer stressed that Britain was ready to adapt amid escalation in the Middle East.
Our jets were in the sky again last night, over Jordan, Qatar, and other partners, refueling in the air to prolong their mission. And we're constantly resupplying our jets and our missile stores. And we are responding to requests from allies in the region.
Starmer told the news conference that Britain had already been redeploying military equipment across the region before the start of the war. Starmer's comments came after an Iranian drone attack on its military base in Cyprus. Meanwhile, President Trump has criticized Starmer for failing to provide sufficient support for his strikes on Iran. Cabinet Minister James Murray said Starmer was acting appropriately, arguing that Britain's relationship with the U.S. remains, quote, historic, long-standing, and deep. Cyprus is raising concerns about its security after a drone strike targeted a British military base on the island. The Cypriot High Commissioner to the United Kingdom said people in Cyprus are disappointed with the UK government's response. Here's more.
They say they feel more could be done to protect the island. The comments coming after a drone struck a Royal Air Force base there on Monday. Britain's Ministry of Defense says the drone involved in the strike was not launched from Iran. Cyprus emphasizing that British bases cannot be viewed separately from the rest of Cyprus, noting that Cypriot civilians share the same security risks. Meanwhile, Italy today saying it's planning to send air defense aid to Gulf countries and naval assets to Cyprus. Have a listen.
This is why, together with Spain, France, and the Netherlands, we will be sending naval assets to protect Cyprus in the coming days.
Italy says it will reinforce its mission in the Middle East by deploying additional defensive assets, including anti-drone and anti-missile systems. It will also order national air defenses to be raised to the highest level. The country's foreign minister saying the government has already helped around 10,000 nationals leave the area. Italy also says it's ready to protect its economy and households from the fallout of the Middle East crisis. It's finalizing measures to support exporters as energy prices rise and shipping routes come under strain.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and soon to be the special envoy for the Shield of the Americas, is speaking in Nashville at the Sergeants Benevolent Association's Major Cities Conference. Her remarks are expected to focus on cooperation between DHS and local law enforcement. Let's listen in.
Safety threats, but also being an example to our next generation of Americans. Our kids and our grandkids are desperate for examples to look up to. And the way that you lead, the way that you enforce the law, and the way that you do it with compassion, but also firmness, sets an example for how we want all Americans to live their lives. So just thank you for that, and know that we pray for you, that God will have his hand on you and your families and continue to bless you as you do your work. Listen, I'd like to thank everybody who's hosted me today. I know we've got a host of leaders that are here. We just met with Vince backstage a little bit and talked with him a little bit. Tony obviously has been very helpful. Michael, who is from the New York State Chief of Department, Mark Ross, Craig Miller. We've got Craig Lally as well, and then the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police Recording Secretary Rob is here, and then Rochester Police Locust Club President Jeff is with us as well. But would you give all of those individuals who stepped up into a leadership position a round of applause for what they do to bring everybody together? Now, in his State of the Union address just last week, President Trump reminded us of what it is every American's duty to do, and that is to serve the American people. That's what the government is to do, those elected officials and those that step up into public service, is to fulfill our duty to protect American citizens, that they should come first under our Constitution and our laws, and they should be prioritized, and especially over other people who are from other countries. The Constitution demands that we treat our citizens that way, and the men and women who serve at the Department of Homeland Security, they understand the importance of that, and we also understand the importance of all of our law enforcement officers and what they do across the country to keep people safe. The department was formed after the horrific events on 9/11, and just 2 years later, as Congress put the department together with the support of the president, 23 different agencies who had a nexus and a focus on defending the homeland were put in order to make sure that they were all following the same mission every single day. So it's a very diverse department. It not only has FLETC in it that trains over 130 different federal law enforcement agencies and officers from those agencies. It also includes CBP, ICE, CWMD, which is Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction. So some of you may have gone through some of those trainings to help us detect some of the threats here in our homeland, and also some of the trainings that it takes as far as responding to fires and 911 calls in different specific situations. We have intelligence agencies. We also cover FEMA. FEMA is a disaster response agency, but it also is the agency that's entrusted to run the government on our very worst day. If we had a tragedy in this country where we needed someone to step up because our leadership was not able to, that agency would be entrusted to do that and to maintain our critical infrastructure. So they ensure that they go forward and maintain our electrical grid and our critical infrastructure such as water and systems that we rely on every day to help the American people be safe and to still have their way of life. We also have CISA, which some of you may have worked with them, which is our cybersecurity agency, which goes out and not only hunts down bad actors that would attack us on our cyber systems, but also gives us mitigation measures for how we can harden our systems. All of these entities work together to serve the American people and to make sure that we're prepared for any threats that we may face, but also respond to them in a way that honors what our ideals are. The sacred duty of our government, truly, is that people are entrusted to secure the rights also of all the American people. You know, the Declaration of Independence states that governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed, which is the people. The people give us the right to do our jobs each and every day. And as long as this world is fractured and as long as human nature is fallen, we will need brave men and women who step up and serve and enforce our rights and our laws and our values. And that's what all of you do in this room with your colleagues. The heroism was on full display this last week when we saw the attack in Austin, Texas, and we saw that the first responders that helped protected people and more lives there were our law enforcement that responded immediately. Instead of running away, they ran to it. And though we lost 3 lives and saw many other people injured, they prevented so many other lives from being lost. We're very grateful that they are willing to do that and to serve in such a way. In fact, it reminded me of the quote that is often attributed to George Orwell that states, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalfs," which means you step up in order to protect people, and you do it in a way that other people often are never going to be required to. When tragedies like what we saw in Austin take place, it's your leadership and it's your decision making that make all the difference. You use judgment, and people entrust you with their lives. You're on the front lines of leadership, and you have the responsibility of guiding and also shaping the next generation. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for what you do. I know that I've met many of you in the room. I've had the chance to visit with you. I appreciate your wisdom and your advice as we continue to develop trainings and insight into how leadership can work together to make good decisions and to break down the silos between agencies so that we can work together more different, in better ways than we have in the past. And you know we're seeing challenges across the country from judges and courts that are working to stop some of our efforts, that are looking to take away some of the protections that you need in law to do your work. And then also we're seeing some challenges from sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. In fact, after I get done sharing a few more words, I want to hear your questions on ways that we can help you do your jobs. If you're in a situation where the laws may be a little different than it is in other states, or you may have unique challenges that perhaps we could work together on to find ways to help you bring criminals to justice and to protect your community from public safety threats. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's the greatest country in the world that has great cities and great communities. Regardless of where people live, we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to go to work every day safely and to send their kids to school safely every day. Sanctuary cities do give us a challenge because it makes it difficult at times for law enforcement to do their work. And we see that many times when a city cooperates with the federal government, cooperates with our federal officers, that it is safer. In fact, 7 of our top 10 safest countries in the nation are not sanctuary cities. They're cities where the local law enforcement partners with us. They partner with our federal agencies, with the FBI, DEA, ATF, CBP, ICE, and our operations. And we've also seen across the country where 5 of our 10 most crime-ridden cities do not cooperate with us, where those that are not cooperative with federal officers will see challenges on their streets. We've seen a lot of different situations from city to city. The one thing I would encourage you that no matter how frustrated you may be with some of that we can find a way to work together to do some good work for our people. In fact, even in Memphis, where we saw different leadership, we had different parties in the governorship and in the mayor, we still were able to arrest and bring to justice over 2,600 criminals, and in a way that significantly dropped their crime rate and significantly helped those communities continue to take those public safety threats off the streets. We got over 150 different illegal sex offenders off of the street. We saw one of those arrests included a criminal illegal alien from Venezuela that was convicted of aggravated criminal assault and abuse of a child. I'm thankful that that individual is no longer on the streets because of the cooperation of those local law enforcement. We have agreements across the country called 287G agreements. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but there is 3 different models that are available. One is a jail model that helps us with some detention. The other is a warrant service officer model that is extremely helpful for us to make sure that we can take jurisdiction or of an individual who's a criminal in the safety of an environment of a courthouse or a jail, and they can be turned over to ICE so that we have the ability to return them back home. And the other model would be in the task force model, which I hope many of you have the opportunity to cooperate with us in, where we can use our different authorities to go out and go after the worst of the worst, those targeted operations that go after violent offenders and criminal offenders, and that we can bring them to justice and get them out of your city and your state. We've seen that program go from before President Trump was in office to only 135 of those agreements across the country signed, to now we have over 1,400 of them in place. And it's been very beneficial to make sure that we've removed over 400,000 criminal offenders out of this country. We've seen 3 million people leave our country that were here illegally, but over 750,000 of them were arrested and detained and removed. We'd much rather prefer that they volunteer to go home and that it can be a volunteer situation, but if not, if people are here illegally and committing crimes, we want to make sure we're able to detain them and get them out of your communities before we create more victims in the United States. I'm grateful for the work that you do because it's made a difference across this country. This last year, we've seen our murder rate in the United States of America drop to the lowest level since it's ever been recorded. And we've recorded our murder rate across the country for 125 years, and this year we broke the record for the lowest murder rate in the country, and that's because of the work of individuals in this room and individuals that we've been able to partner with. We've also taken 1.7 billion lethal doses of drugs off our streets and stopped them from coming into the United States. That means 1.7 billion people will still be with us because of the work that our agencies and our work has done. Our Coast Guard is an important asset in the Department of Homeland Security, and they've worked with us, and maybe have worked with some of you in the room as well, to help interdict those drugs and stop them from coming into our country. You know, President Trump has been working hard to make sure that he's delivering on what he promised the American people, and that's to make America safe again. In doing so, we have gone out and found over 1,500 known and suspected terrorists that were let into this country over the open border invasion that we saw during the last administration. Those 1,500 individuals who are already on our known and suspected terrorist watch list have been brought to justice and removed. We know there's many more, but we're going to still continue to look for them, to find them, and to do all that we can to make sure that this country is safe. Beyond that, we've also arrested and removed over 7,700 gang members, TDA members, MS-13, Sinaloa cartel. The president is extremely focused on fighting cartels and recognize them as a foreign terrorist organization so that we can have new authorities to go after them. And we'll be working throughout the Western Hemisphere with all the countries to make sure that we're biting the snake off, cutting its head off with fighting the cartels before they ever reach the United States, stopping the drug flow, stopping the guns and ammunition from getting here and hurting our families in the homeland. We'll continue to work together to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that. To everybody in the room that puts on a uniform, that wears a badge, that steps out every single day and does something that so few others do, put your life on the line for your brothers and your sisters and your families, and you do it in your home community, I want to say thank you. And I also want to let you know that I believe that if there's something that you need for your families, that you need to let us know. I've found many times people can't do their job with excellence if there's a crisis at home. I've been working to get raises and better salaries and retirements for all of our law enforcement officers that are at the Department of Homeland Security, because I recognize that if you're having challenges at home financially, providing for your family, working overtime to make ends meet, trying to buy a house and put food on the table, it's very difficult to focus on your job and to do it with excellence. We want to take care of our families. So all of your suggestions and ideas, bring them forward. I will continue to push for that because I'm a strong believer that we need you at the top of your game every day. And that means that your family needs to be right beside you, happy, healthy, and whole, and that God can continue to protect you and protect them and make sure that you have a chance at the American dream too. So with that, why don't we open it up to some questions? I know some of you may have some prepared and some of you may just thought, hey, I've always wanted to ask her this. You sure can.
Secretary.
Yes, sir.
Rob will say that.
Yes.
What a blessing it is to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Given our current state in Chicago, we understand we have no qualms about the sanctuary law enforcement, but more of a targeted response. I think the hearts and minds of a lot of, I'm a great grandson of Mexican Polish immigrants. A lot of people, they just, when you go after, for lack of a better term, the tamale lady, it kind of like, they've been there 30 years, they're not causing trouble as opposed to the criminals you just mentioned. So
Right.
I think that needs to be the focus in Chicago, and more strategic planning that needs to happen similar. I think Tom Holland is suited for that as a former New York cop.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I don't know if you guys heard that question, but he talked about targeted enforcement. And Rob was saying how it's much more effective in a lot of, especially these sanctuary cities, where we can work on targeting those individuals who have a criminal history besides their legal status that may be in violation of their visa or work permit, but that we work on those and make sure we're going out and doing that with the local law enforcement as much as we possibly can. And that is something that we are going to continue to do and make sure that we're focusing and prioritizing those individuals and make sure that we're addressing the public safety threats there. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Tax-free pensions, our president's big on that. Tax-free pensions for retirees, law enforcement, and first responders. I think that'd be a good pitch.
Okay, let me visit with him about it. That'd be great. Well, we're talking about doing some other tax benefits for other, so that may be something we could wrap into that conversation. Great idea. Perfect. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Secretary. My name is Chris Galligan. I'm the Vice President of San Francisco Police Officers Association. First of all, I just want to say thank you for recognizing major cities and all of our police unions here across the nation. It means a great deal for you to be here today, so thank you for that. My question, local officers have increasingly been on the front lines of Homeland Security, yet we are still funded and staffed like a city responsibility, not a national one. How will DHS ensure local agencies aren't carrying federal priorities on local budgets and with local staffing?
So you maybe have some challenges in San Francisco just because of your state laws and local laws that may, although you've got a mayor that works with us very well.
That's great.
He probably doesn't want me to talk about it a lot, actually,
Please do.
but he has been cooperative, and we have great conversations and talk quite often. And many times in doing law enforcement in your city, if the federal task force is coming in, you know, it's more preferable for the FBI to lead and the Department of Homeland Security to come in supportive roles, which is what we've done, and that works very well in your city. Thank you for your focus there, too. I think the city is seeing some dramatic improvements under this leadership. When you talk about funding, we have tied a lot of our funding that we have for enforcement this year and prioritized over $1.5 billion towards 287G agreements. So we've reimbursed departments that have an agreement, or a county or a sheriff, with funding them on overtime or on benefits, some of the other things that we can do. We've also, on the jail model, obviously reimbursed per beds. If you don't have the opportunity to participate in 287G, I think your best options for funding alternatives would be through some grants that we have at the department. We have specific grants towards terrorism grants that you can do, some security grants, and there's hazard mitigation grants that are in Homeland Security safety grants through FEMA that would be available. So maybe what I'll do is I will forward those grant opportunities to all of you so that you can share them with your departments and have that opportunity. We also have some grants specifically targeted towards special operations. So if you've got some special operations that fit into that category, we could get you some funding that way.
Great. Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes. Hi, Craig. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Most recently, one police officer and one sergeant called Border Patrol for assistance, and then after that happened, he tried to fire them for asking Border Patrol to come assist them.
Oh, shoot.
Most recently, they just suspended both officers for 30 days without pay.
The Border Patrol?
No, Detroit
Oh, those
police.
officers in Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit
okay.
police. So the one incident was the female of the house called because the husband was trying to break into the house. When the officers got there, he had a bad passport and a bad social security card. So they called Border Patrol for assistance. Mm-hmm. They ended up taking him to jail because he had a warrant outside the city of Detroit. The second one was a traffic stop. The fingerprint reader wasn't working, so they called for them to bring theirs over there, and the person had a warrant also. So both officers got suspended without pay for 30 days.
So did the officers that did the arresting, was that the Detroit officers that did it, or did the Border Patrol?
Border Patrol ended up arresting them because one had an out the city warrant, and the other one had other information that.
Okay. That's one of the things that I think a lot of citizens don't necessarily know, is that CBP and ICE are law enforcement officers and do enforce other crimes that have been committed. But if we can be advocates for those law enforcement officers, we certainly will. And maybe we could come up with some kind of an agreement that would allow those officers to still be able to call on Border Patrol for backup and assistance when they need it. I hate to put them in a situation where now the officers in Detroit, when they need help and need assistance, that they can't call on Border Patrol when they might be the closest asset. So maybe I'll get some contact information from you and see what we can do to work out an agreement with Detroit on being able to call on Border Patrol with some guidance on how those interactions will work.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Good afternoon,
and you were just watching now Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, soon to be the special envoy for the Shield of the Americas, speaking right after President Trump announcing the change in position and highlighting the importance of DHS, including efforts that the agency has done, including deporting criminal illegal aliens, stopping drugs from coming into the United States, and arresting and deporting gang members. Okay, now we're moving on from that. To talk about the Iran war from the Israeli perspective, joining us now live from Efrat, Israel, is Matthew Faraci, the founder of Torch QRF, a rapid response organization that exposes atrocities against faith communities and protects religious liberty in regions of severe persecution. So Matt, thank you so much for coming on. You're in Israel as we speak, and I just want to mention you actually witnessed from your doorstep an Iranian missile headed for Israel in the sky. We actually have that video. We'll bring it up in just a moment. But just describe for us, what are you seeing? What does the situation look like there on the ground?
So the situation here is I would say it's subtly quiet at the moment. One of the challenges that people face is in the first couple of days, the missiles were coming fast and furious, hot and heavy, constantly. And now they're more sporadic. The reason that we think for the sporadic nature, we've talked to a couple experts here in Israel, is that the Iranians had the original missiles armed and programmed to be heading towards Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and major cities in the beginning of the war. And now, because the United States and Israel have knocked out so many missile sites, now the theory is that you have lower command people in charge, let's say at missile trucks throughout Iran. They have to put the missiles together. They have to program them to head somewhere, and their leadership's been cut off. So we're seeing the results of that. Today is the first day in Israel that we've seen an actual loosening of restrictions. So previous to today, you were supposed to stay in your house. The businesses were not open. Today, except grocery stores and hospitals. Today, we're starting to see slowly restaurants and other things opening up. It does not mean by any means we're out of the woods. Iran has fired hundreds of drones at Israel that we know, and hundreds of missiles. So Israel is still very much on high alert, but we are seeing a lessening of the intensity of the air bombardment.
So Matt, can I just follow up on that? You said restrictions are looser now. Can you paint a picture for us in detail? What do Israeli cities and streets look like before, and what does it look like right now?
Well, let me give you a good example. Yesterday, I was driving through Jerusalem, and the traffic was pretty light, but then an air raid siren went off. So what happens? Some people will pull their cars off to the right and lay on the ground. There are traffic tunnels. Some people will pull into the tunnels. It's pretty much controlled chaos. And the reason I say controlled chaos is Israelis, believe it or not, are used to this. So in the United States, if something like this happened, everything would shut down and it would kind of be a bit of a mess. Here in Israel, it's a country that unfortunately is used to war. It's used to conflict. It's used to missiles being fired into its territory. And so kind of like Britain during World War II, during the Battle of Britain, when people just sort of had a stiff upper lip and got in their bomb shelters and then went and resumed normal life, that's what you see here in Israel. There's reports of a bar mitzvah that actually took place in a bomb shelter. There's also something that Ambassador Huckabee tweeted about, a dating app that actually developed just since the beginning of the war, so singles can find each other in the bomb shelters. So Israelis are unbelievably resilient, and also the entire country right now is upbeat. People know that this is what needs to happen. They're incredibly grateful for the partnership from President Trump in the United States, and they know that the Band-Aid has to be ripped off from this existential threat that is Iran. So people in the country are not downtrodden at all. They're very, very upbeat right now.
And what's behind this upbeat emotion? Because you described people have to quickly reach shelters, right? So for our viewers who may not understand, could you describe that for us? What is behind this emotion?
Well, in a word, God. This is a nation that believes in God, and this is a nation that believes that God has been part of its destiny from the beginning, and God's destiny and the destiny of the Jewish people in the Bible comes from history and is going into the future. And so people know that they're part of this great story that continues. In fact, Israel just passed the holiday of Purim. Purim is from the Bible in the book of Esther, where it explains. And by the way, the two same countries are big actors in that story, Persia, Iran, and Israel. And in that story, Haman tries to wipe out the Jewish people, and then God comes to the aid of the Jewish people and saves them. And people were literally reading the story of Esther from their air raid shelters this Purim here in Israel, just shaking their heads and saying, what a blessing that we live in biblical times and that we get to become and continue to be part of this story. And it's something that's hard to understand if you're not in Israel, but it's a purely spiritual thing in the Holy Land, in a very spiritual country.
Okay, Matt, I know we're on a tight timeline here, so I just have one more question for you. And we just learned President Trump told Axios that in an interview that he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader. Just your final comments on this.
Thank God. One of the problems that we had during the Bush administration, if your viewers will recall, is that the Americans were, and particularly people like Paul Bremer, were warned that if they disbanded the Iraqi army was going to go under and become the next insurgents. What you've seen President Trump and Secretary Rubio do in Venezuela, you're probably going to see a similar approach in Iran. They're cutting the head off the snake, but the people that have the civil service jobs, the police jobs, and the other jobs, likely they're going to keep them temporarily in power until they can slowly transition them to something else. This is much like what the United States did in Nazi Germany after World War II in the rebuilding. And so what the president is signaling is that this is not going to be a forever war. We're not going to turn this thing into an insurgency. The United States is going to have, we broke it, we own it, we're going to fix it, and we're going to make sure that there's a stable situation and that we don't have a hostile Iran. We have the opposite. So again, President Trump's approval rating in Israel is probably hovering around 427% on a scale of 1 to 100.
That's incredible, Matt. Really very much appreciate you talking to us today. Please stay safe. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Insurance premiums are rising for ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Joining us now is E.J. Antony, Chief Economist for the Heritage Foundation. So EJ, good afternoon. To start off, I just want to ask you, for our viewers who may not be very familiar with this situation, explain for us what is Lloyd's of London and why and how much are they raising risk premiums?
Sure. It's essentially a very large insurance brokerage based out of the United Kingdom, a very old establishment. And the reason they are having to raise their premiums so much is because premiums are ultimately based on risk. In other words, what are the odds that the person with an insurance plan is actually going to have to file a claim? And not only what are the odds of the claim, but how much will the claim be? In other words, how large will the damages be? And what Lloyd's of London is seeing right now with the war in Iran is that the odds of losses as ships traverse the Strait of Hormuz right around Iran, the odds are incredibly high right now. And we've already seen damages as a result of the war. And so if they're going to insure vessels, they're going to demand incredibly high premiums to compensate for the risk because they're having to make up for an increased likelihood of very, very large payouts. These are not, these are not recreational vessels. They are incredibly expensive vessels, and because of their size, they're carrying an incredibly expensive amount of cargo. So again, with the increased risk is coming increased insurance premiums.
So EJ, technically speaking, the waterway is still physically open. So talk to us about how have the actions of Lloyd's of London impacted companies or traffic through the strait, despite it being open?
Well, it's certainly open in one sense. It's not as if Iran has built a literal physical wall or some other kind of barrier. But you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk of trying to traverse the strait? And a lot of people right now are saying, no, it simply isn't. And some of that, you're right, does have to do with the fact that the insurance premiums, again, have gone up so dramatically that people are saying economically it's not worth it. But a lot of other individuals and businesses continue to make the assessment that regardless of whatever the insurance costs are, because let's not forget some firms are so large that they self-insure, in many instances they're saying, no, it's just simply not worth the risk, because if Iran or anybody else is lobbing a missile into that area and it happens to hit one of our vessels, the losses there can be pretty catastrophic. Economically speaking, obviously there's going to be the loss of life, which is tragic associated with that as well. So again, it's not as if you need a physical blockading of the strait to effectively shut down commerce.
Okay, EJ, if I may, I want to focus a bit more now on what President Trump is doing in response to this. President Trump's move to instruct the U.S. Development Finance Corporation to provide coverage. What are your comments on that?
I think it's an incredible risk for taxpayers. Look, it's one of those situations where the president is making he's making a real gamble here. If they insure all of these vessels and absolutely nothing happens and everyone traverses the strait safely, well, in that case, you have premiums going to the Treasury, more or less, and because of that, the president is going to win, the administration wins. No harm, no foul. But if anything does go wrong, the American taxpayer is now on the hook to cover a tremendous amount of damages. So again, I think the only way you can look at this is that it's quite a gamble by the president. Remember, companies like Lloyd's of London have a profit incentive. If there is a financial incentive to insure these ships at reasonably low prices, then the private businesses would be doing it anyway, but they're not because the risk is so heightened right now.
So EJ, if an incident does occur in this waterway, what are we looking at in terms of payout for the insurance?
Well, it depends on the plan, and it can really run the gamut there in terms of how much the cargo is actually going to be covered, and then the vessel as well. Are we talking about replacing a vessel with a brand new one, replacing it with a like piece of equipment? In other words, if the vessel's 25 years old, there's going to be a big cost difference in terms of replacing it with a brand new vessel or a similar vessel of similar vintage. So it really depends there in terms of cost. Also, what kind of cargo is being carried, right? If you look at the cargo exiting that region of the world, it's primarily energy. It's going to be LNG, it's going to be crude. In terms of the cargo coming in, it's going to be refined energy products. So think gasoline. It's going to be foodstuffs. So it can really vary tremendously just what is on the ships. Obviously, if you have a dedicated piece of equipment like an LNG tanker, it's only carrying LNG and it's carrying it one way. But when you're talking about a cargo ship, again, depending on what's on that vessel will really impact how much the vessel is going to be insured for and what a potential payout would look like if, heaven forbid, that ship is sunk.
So you're saying that the taxpayer could be on the hook for a lot of money. Are we talking about 6 figures, 7 figures, any ballpark?
Oh, it's easily, you're easily looking at plans that are $1 billion or more. Not every plan, obviously, but that can very easily be the case. Again, these are very, very large vessels. This is not some kind of small recreational craft, right, that we're talking about here. We're talking about ships that, for example, they displace far more water than any kind of like World War II era ship ever did. So these are very, very large, very expensive pieces of equipment. And because of their size, they're carrying very large volumes and therefore very expensive amounts of cargo.
Okay, EJ, thank you for talking to us today. It's been a pleasure.
No, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
A federal trade court with exclusive jurisdiction over importer claims has ordered the Trump administration to begin refunding billions of dollars. More news after this break.
I have traveled all over the world to 50 countries now, and I have never seen a production any better than this anywhere.
Breathtaking. It is absolutely stunning.
It's so uplifting.
I feel better about the world.
It was encouraging, gave me hope.
It was absolutely amazingly divine.
I thought that I was going to heaven.
You have to come see it.
Multiple times.
It's worth every penny.
Make sure you see it. Make sure you see it.
Returns to David Koch Theater, March 25th through April 12th. Shenyun.com. Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at Puretang.com.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Breaking news coming out of the Trump administration. Kristi Noem will leave her role as DHS secretary. In a post on Truth Social just now, President Trump says Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma will take over as DHS secretary starting March 31st. He says Noem has served well with spectacular results. Noem will become the special envoy for the Shield of the Americas. This is the president's new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere. Trump will announce the initiative this Saturday in Doral, Florida, alongside a dozen Latin American nations. House Republicans again urging the passing of DHS funding. Democrats have been holding up the budget, demanding reforms to ICE operations.
Now, especially with conflict in the Middle East, is not the time to block funding for the Department of Homeland Security. We could be under attack by Iran. Cybersecurity issues have already risen in our borders already in the last week. It is time for Senate Democrats and House Democrats to do the right thing for the country and to fund the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill.
Democrats' demands include banning masks for ICE agents, banning ICE operations at churches and schools, and requiring judicial warrants. The House Republican Conference has not agreed to meet these demands. House Republicans also using the time to honor the 6 American service members killed in the war with Iran. They say while U.S. troops abroad are protecting Americans, the DHS needs to be able to safeguard Americans at home. Funding for the department has lapsed since mid-February. ICE operations are still funded. War Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke today at the inaugural America's Counter-Cartel Conference. Hegseth urged Latin American countries to pursue a more aggressive approach against drug cartels, touting the Pentagon's success in combating traffickers.
Last month, we went a few weeks without targeting a single boat. Why? Well, because we couldn't find a whole lot of boats to sink. And that's the whole point, is to establish deterrence from narco-terrorists who have been able to traffic almost unfettered.
Regional defense and security leaders from the Caribbean, Central America, and South America were among those attending the conference. Since the start of the second term of President Trump, he has much turned of his focus toward Latin America. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says he would consider dropping out of the Texas GOP Senate primary race if the Senate abolishes the filibuster and passes the Save America Act. Paxton had said earlier that he would not drop out even if President Trump endorsed his opponent. Incumbent Senator John Cornyn, that is. The Save America Act would require voters to provide proof of citizenship to register and photo ID to vote in federal elections. Paxton took to X, posting, quote, "The Save America Act is the most important bill the U.S. Senate could ever pass, and I'm committed to helping President Trump getting it done." Paxton criticized Cornyn for refusing to support abolishing the filibuster to pass the legislation. Paxton and Cornyn advanced to a runoff Tuesday after neither candidate received more than 50% of the vote. Trump says he plans to make an endorsement in the race shortly. Montana Senator Steve Daines is exiting the 2026 race. He announced he will not seek re-election just minutes before yesterday's filing deadline.
I'm also very thankful to have served alongside President Trump and my colleagues in the Senate. Together, we built a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. We spearheaded Republican control of the U.S. Senate. We delivered the largest tax cut in U.S. history. We unleashed American energy dominance and secured our southern border. We also enacted the bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act, the most significant conservation achievement in half a century.
The Republican senator was widely expected to win a third term in the state. President Trump carried nearly by 20 points in 2024. He previously served 2 terms in the House before joining the Senate. Daines thanked his wife, Cindy, and said the couple is looking forward to spending more time in Montana with their 7 grandchildren. Republicans now face a competitive primary in Montana on June 2nd. U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme quickly entered the race, already endorsed by President Trump. 3 Democrats have also declared their campaigns for the Senate seat. And a federal judge yesterday ordered the Trump administration to begin issuing more than $100 billion in potential tariff refunds. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
In a 3-page order on Wednesday, federal trade court Judge Richard Eaton, the judge with exclusive jurisdiction over the Trump tariff cases, ordered the administration to pay back all imports eligible for automatic court-ordered refunds. Or in other words, those that are still within the legal window to challenge the tariffs charged or have already filed lawsuits. The ruling follows the Supreme Court's February 20th opinion that President Trump's sweeping global tariffs were unconstitutional. A 6-3 high court majority said the president didn't have the authority to impose the tariffs under an emergency powers law. They left open Trump's ability to impose tariffs under different trade laws. But it's still unclear how the refund process will play out. The current order is silent on a deadline for the refunds to be paid or whether there are any reporting requirements. It also doesn't say whether or not the administration must pay interest. And as dozens of new cases continue to come in, the court is temporarily placing them on hold. The Trump administration is expected to quickly challenge the refund ruling. Judge Eaton has scheduled a hearing in the case for Friday. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi are being sued over the government's approval of a deal with TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance. The plaintiff alleges that the agreement is illegal. The Public Integrity Project filed the lawsuit on behalf of 2 U.S. senators in rival social media companies, Google parent Alphabet and Meta. The organization claims the agreement puts the allies of the administration in a position to censor content on the popular platform. The suit is the first legal challenge to the deal made with investors associated with Trump. Congress passed legislation in April 2024 requiring ByteDance to sell its U.S. assets or face a ban or potentially hundreds of billions of dollars in fines. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee has voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi. The summons is over the Justice Department's handling of the files tied to the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking investigation. Here's more.
The measure was introduced by South Carolina Republican Nancy Mace, passing in a 24-19 vote with bipartisan support. Democrats accuse the Justice Department of failing to comply with an earlier subpoena and obstructing congressional oversight. The department has denied those claims. Bondi has defended the DOJ's handling of the files. She accuses Democrats of using the controversy to distract from President Trump's second-term agenda. The Justice Department says it has already released about half of the roughly 6 million Epstein-related records, including millions of pages of documents, images, and videos. Attacks
influenced by the Chinese Communist Party against the faith group are raising concerns. In London, a couple of days ago, a male bus driver brutally assaulted a female Falun Gong practitioner outside the British Museum. The incident is believed to be an extension of Beijing's ongoing persecution of the faith group, which has been taking place for nearly 27 years. NTD's Flora Hua spoke with the victim to learn firsthand what happened.
Bruises on her face and broken nails. All this to silence a volunteer as she tries to raise awareness of Beijing's persecution of her faith group Falun Gong. Zhang Chunping has been doing volunteer work for over a decade. Last Monday, she was brutally attacked while speaking to Chinese tourists outside the British Museum.
There was a Chinese tour guide on the bus. She reprimanded me loudly, saying I wasn't allowed to speak, and her attitude was extremely hostile.
To avoid escalating tensions, Zhang stopped talking to the tourists, but she was still holding a banner, hoping the tourists can read about the persecution. A driver rushed out of the tour bus, rubbed the banner from Zhang alongside her cell phone, and threw them away. And he knocked her down onto the ground twice.
After being knocked down, when my head and body hit the ground, I was in great pain. After knocking me to the ground, he straddled me with both legs to prevent me from getting up and continued beating me.
The UK police is investigating the incident, labeling it a criminal case. The bus company FCD is under EG Travel, which caters to Chinese visitors. The company's own website shows it has received a number of CCP officials since 2011, including former Premier Li Keqiang in 2015. It also works with the Chinese embassy in Ireland. Zhang shared that a Chinese tour guide once told her that the CCP has regularly threatened tour agencies to avoid Falun Gong practitioners and fed them with a lot of CCP propaganda. But she said she will continue her volunteer work despite the trauma from this incident.
Many of my fellow Chinese people are living under propaganda without access to truthful information.
When I asked her if she has something to say to the people who abused her, she said,
I do not hate them. I only hope they can hear the truth and understand what Falun Gong really is, not the version portrayed by the CCP. I hope to reach them through my compassion. Please stop hating Falun Gong and stop attacking its practitioners. We're peacefully sharing the truth.
52-year-old Zhang is originally from China. The CCP had jailed her and thrown her into labor camps for her faith multiple times before she fled to the Netherlands. Flora Hua, NTD News.
We find out about China's role in how Operation Epic Fury is viewed by Americans and the world through its ties to pro-Iranian regime protest groups on U.S. soil. More stories after this break. Stay with us.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analysis, investigative reporting, and original award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage